Hello and welcome. Thank you for attending our webinar on the engagement of employees and how we can get more engagement with offline employees. My name is Bronson Dameron. I'm the Director of Content. Unfortunately, Shanae McCleskey, who was slated to be one of our intrepid speakers today, came down with food poisoning. And so she's dealing with that, and we wish her the best as she's recovering. So I'm hopping in here today, and I'll be speaking with Joe Rice, the VP of Partnerships on ScreenCloud. Joe, if you could introduce yourself a little bit, give us a little bit of your background and help us get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, sounds great. I appreciate the opportunity to join you folks. So I'm Joe Rice. I head up partnerships at ScreenCloud. In short, we're a cloud-based digital signage solution helping organizations improve communication and engagement with their employees. And we tend to focus and help a lot with organizations with large frontline or deskless workers who don't have access, lack access to desktops and mobile apps when they're doing their daily job. And thus our tie-up integration partnership with Awardco. So I've spent the last 5 or 6 months getting the integration ready, and which it is now, which is exciting. So excited to be here and talk about that and the importance ultimately of getting recognition up on screens so everyone can see it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And maybe you could share a little bit about your background. How long have you been with ScreenCloud again? Maybe you mentioned that and I just didn't.
Yeah, relatively new. I joined about 8 months ago, so last summer. That's right.
Yeah, that's great. And where were you before you were with ScreenCloud? What's your career trajectory been like?
Yeah, so I've been in the partnerships game for most of my career and mainly in technology. Spent about 7.5 years at Twitter prior to joining ScreenCloud. I was part of the developer platform team there, the data licensing business. And a good run. I think we know how that story ended.
Yeah.
Discussion stories over a beer sometime, but no, it was a great run. Thankful for that, but also thankful, to be at ScreenCloud where we're doing some really cool things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about a lot of those cool things in our webinar today, just to kind of dive into that. But specifically, we're really interested and we're really excited, Joe and I, to talk to all of you attending about the importance of engagement and how you can kind of drive that with your offline employees. So many of you attending, we understand you may already know, and you probably already do know, the importance of engagement and how recognition plays into that. And so what we want to do is kind of pull all that together and have a really great discussion on that and how Awardco helps with that, and Joe, your experience and how ScreenCloud can wrap into that as well. So we invite you all to hop into the chat, talk about where you're from, and tell us a little bit about yourselves as well. And please feel free to pipe into this chat as well and the Q&A. Joe and I will be monitoring that throughout, so we'll be able to have more of a free-flowing discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of your questions real time. So let's dive into the webinar here. As you can tell, Joe's with ScreenCloud, I'm with Awardco. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. We're going to be talking about creating a culture of recognition on the front line. Joe, I'm curious, when you think of front line, how do you define front line in terms of in a professional setting?
Yeah, we tend to use the term deskless, but frontline works. But those are just folks who don't sit at a desk or in front of a computer all day or at all. They tend to work on a manufacturing floor, a warehouse. They could be wandering around. They could be in medicine at a hospital. But they get information through other means than a computer in most cases. So that the challenge is, how do you reach folks and communicate with them when they're wandering around a building or a campus for most of their day?
Yeah, and I think that I read a study, maybe you can corroborate this. I read a study a few months back that said that a vast majority of workers around the world are not attached to a computer. And maybe that's like unsurprising in some respects, so that it's, well, yeah, most people aren't in front of a computer. But I'd still think that that's worth mentioning, that so many people aren't connected to a computer daily and they need other ways to experience recognition.
That's right. Yeah, most estimates arrive around that 80% number. So 80% of the global workforce, is not desk-based. And when you dive into that more, it's fascinating. We talk a lot about technology to make us more efficient. AI is all the craze now, and how will that change jobs and make us more productive and whatnot. But up until this point, anyway, only about 1% of corporate enterprise IT spend has actually been focused on technologies for deskless workers. So we have this giant workforce, 80% of the workforce, give or take, and yet there hasn't been a lot of investment in their productivity and communicating to them. So I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, why do you think that is? Why is 80% of the global workforce not at a deskless worker, and yet only 1%, as you mentioned, is going towards technologies to help support that kind of industry? Why do you think that is? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have a feeling it was I think if you think about the folks who tend to create a lot of technology, SaaS technology over the years, it's built for people like them. And thus you see a lot of the same sorts of technology being produced and copies of it. So better marketing tech and HR tech and social media analytics and on and on. We create things that solve problems that we need, right? And not necessarily those that have other jobs. So I think that's part of it. Probably many things to blame, but I think we do need to be more empathetic ultimately to the needs of frontline workers. And how we communicate to them, engage them, and improve their experience.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that Awardco and ScreenCloud specifically, even though we both are technology organizations, are working to solve that issue, because there's so many ways that we can reach out to different people and we can connect with them and impact their lives through recognition and through engagement. And it's a really interesting industry to be in. So I'm really interested, as any of you in the chat, if you could pipe in and let us know what industry you are with, and start asking some questions like, what are some of the, or telling us some of the issues that you've been having in terms of recognition, or if your industry has a lot of employees that are deskless, let us know. And what are some of the challenges you are facing, and we'll be able to chat about those. But as we continue on here, one thing that the old adage, if a tree falls in a forest, I think most people have heard this, but like, it goes, if a tree falls in a forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it actually make a sound? And there's that's been around in the cultural awareness for quite some time. But the question also remains, like, if recognition happens and nobody's around to see it, or nobody's around to hear it, does it have as much of an impact? So recognizing and appreciating employees is key to workplace happiness and productivity. Definitely key to individual workplace happiness, to individual happiness and productivity, for sure. And we'll talk about that and how it benefits individuals and kind of the brain science behind that. But as you can see here, recognition boosts productivity, engagement, and performance by 14%. Now, this is from a study from Deloitte. It's really interesting because recognition alone has such a huge impact on individuals, but also organizations. And that's why the tree falling metaphor, if you recognize someone and other people see that, behavior begins to kind of cycle, and you get some momentum behind that. And Joe, I wonder if you've seen that in your career, either at ScreenCloud or otherwise, how recognition has impacted you or people that you've worked with.
Yeah, well, I think, I think the science, I'm sure you'll go into the science of the importance of recognition, how that improves the mental state. There's studies showing, interestingly, how it makes you physically taller. People stand up straight, right?
Yeah.
It boosts morale, a sense of camaraderie and team spirit. So, yeah, I think our observation in working in working more in supporting frontline workforces is there's just not enough recognition done. There's just not the systems in place to allow, and I'm not talking about just manager to employee, but peer to peer as well. And that was one of the reasons we were so excited to partner with you folks, is that get that up in the headlines, on the screens, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we're kind of seeing a lot of people in the chat here talking about some sort of the similar challenges that you've brought up there, Joe. We have a lot of people, like, for example, Adam says that his industry is healthcare. Most frontline staff have shared that they don't have time, which makes sense because they're caring for patients. And it's best to spend time caring for patients than on a computer, things like that. Absolutely. A lot of other respondents are like, Carrie, you're talking about how you're in the transportation industry with 65% of the population. They're driver based. Like that's incredible. And it's a challenge to get that group recognized and kind of engaged on Awardco. Totally hear you there. We want to talk about that a little bit more. Fuel truck drivers and healthcare, oil and gas manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, all of these, like, this is just corroborating what you and I talked about, Joe. 80% or more of the global workforce isn't in front of a desk. So how do you get those people engaged, and how can we talk about that, and how can we see the benefits for more people? So as we move on here, employee recognition, and I think most people on this webinar know this, like, employee recognition changes minds and behavior. What gets recognized gets repeated. And I think that that's a behavioral science technique. You know, if you recognize someone, or if you appreciate them, you show gratitude, you show, you express that you see their value, that whatever they did to express and to get that value gets repeated. And if that recognition is seen by others, impact on behavior is amplified and others are motivated to follow a similar track. And that's what we're talking about with ScreenCloud. So Joe, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the webinar, but I'd like to just kind of give all of our attendees a brief rundown of what ScreenCloud and Awardco, how they work together in order to kind of get this impact of recognition throughout an organization.
Certainly, yeah. So the whole idea is that you're already in Awardco, giving recognition and shout outs. The problem statement was, why have to recreate that for the screen? Is there a way to make that integration seamless and automated, so that if I say, hey, Bronson, amazing job on that, moderating that webinar, you're doing a great job, I don't have to go into ScreenCloud and create a template. And of course, you can do that in ScreenCloud. We have our kind of onboard editor called Canvas that allows you to create content, hack things together as needed. But if the content is already in systems that our customers already use, why not make that easy to link that or cast that, if you will, share that onto screens? And so, quite simply, the integration with Awardco allows you to create or recognize as you normally would, and then that appears up on the screens. And of course, we drop in a little QR code, which is quite handy, that when scanned can send the employee back into Awardco to kind of pile on to that, add comments and emojis and all the fun stuff that you can do in Awardco.
Yeah. And we use this integration in Awardco ourselves. And yes, we're a technology company, so most of our employees are at a desk, but it's really great as we're walking around or as we're in a different part of our organization, you can see those recognitions pop up on TV screens. And it's really helpful. Other ways that Awardco can help with that, with the kind of deskless worker situation, I'm sure many of you know about award codes, and you know about text recognitions and things like that. All of these things can kind of unify a culture of recognition, even when your employees aren't at a desk, because that's incredibly challenging. As many of you have been chatting it through, we see that there's a lot of you thinking about this and kind of dealing with this. And I'm wondering, continue to pipe in there and let us know what specific challenges you're facing, and maybe any questions for Joe or for myself, and how we can address that, and how to make it a little bit more effective for you as well. So going on here, we want to talk about the importance of recognition, and we call it the psychology of warm fuzzies, because everybody, I think most people understand that. You kind of, I mean, you see me smiling. I kind of like the idea of warm fuzzies and things like that. Not that work is all warm fuzzies. There's a lot of challenges and opportunities to do and to face at work, but there is a very strong case to be made for the psychology of recognition and the benefits that come from that at work. So here you can see the pyramid of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if any of you are familiar with that. I think that's pretty well in a lot of our minds, where you think about You need to have a foundation of something in order to increase to the next level. So we've kind of taken this, and you can see a hierarchy of human needs down there at the bottom. You have physiological, so like shelter, food, water, safety is next, and that's property and security. What Awardco and ScreenCloud focus on is kind of once you have those other ones taken care of, and generally if you're employed and you're doing well and you're able to kind of take care of the physiological and safety needs, you're able to focus on belonging, esteem, and then self-actualization. So how does that work with recognition? Well, organizations are made by and for human beings, definitely. We're all, there's different industries and things like that. There's a lot of different nuance to it, but ultimately, psychological needs and self-fulfillment can be satisfied with value-driven recognition. So what do we mean by that? Well, we mean that once you are at the belonging stage and you get a job, you need to feel like you belong there. And when you feel like you belong there, you begin to build some of that respect and confidence. You begin to achieve more, and then you can be truly engaged. You can have a big impact where you are, and you can start problem solving. And that is the pinnacle of where we would like all employees to get. But Joe, I wonder if you've, in your management and as you've kind of led teams, have you ever encountered a situation where it was difficult to get an employee to be engaged or to be that kind of self-actualized employee? And what were some of the challenges you faced there, and how were you able to overcome them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love the graph because I think, my observation is psychological safety is so important when it comes to managing teams and building an environment where people are free to be themselves and to communicate and engage and in the way that's right for them. And I think it's an important part of being a manager and a leader is to kind of meet them halfway, even go further to make them feel comfortable and let them, them be them, basically. I guess one thing I just wanted to comment really quickly while I was top of my head was from a recognition perspective, and I guess the self-fulfillment, we see every day how important recognition is, because we see interesting employees taking photos of the screens where they're being recognized and then sharing those in their messaging apps and on social media, right? So that's clearly important to them. I can come back to this later, but we now have about 10,000 customers, and we're live on about 100,000 screens. And from analyzing lots of content, one of our observations is that there's generally too much focus on corporate comms, and not enough on what I call human interest, which recognition would fall into. And I think again comes back to the self-fulfillment and esteem there. So again, nothing wrong with updates on the company and acquisitions and new products and things, but you have to be, I think you do have to be empathetic to the needs of your workforce and what do they want to see. And we've surveyed both groups, and it is interesting to see this kind of this gulf. We see that decision makers tend to focus a lot on wanting to communicate compliance and productivity, company announcements, health and safety. Again, nothing's wrong there, but workers, then they talk about things that's more aspirational in nature: learning and development, rewards and recognition, right? So there's a little bit of a gulf between what people want to see communicated to them and up on screens. And I think that's really interesting, getting to your psychology here of what people want to, how they want to be, what they want to communicate and what they want to be communicated back to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because I agree that there's something to be said for how recognition can impact the individual and how it can benefit the organization. Not that, communicating corporate needs and things like that through different ways isn't important, but employees will speak about things differently and value things a little bit differently, which I think organizations need to know about. So we have some questions here we want to make sure we address. Morgan Clark said, what ideas do you have for frontline supervisors to recognize their non-desk workers? Joe, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, and I will, of course, chime in as well. There's a few ideas that Awardco and that we use internally. So, yeah.
Well, I guess my first thought is aside from the recognition themselves, is how did those folks want to be communicated to, and where would that be seen? Do they have access to the award code sort of solution with the web? Is it via the app? How is recognition done today? I mean, I think there's the very basics of telling people verbally, "Hey, great job! I was really impressed." But when it comes to kind of putting it in writing, digital or otherwise, that's where we come in. I don't know, Bronson, you want to?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think your point about how to making sure that you understand how people like to be communicated with, because if you have non-desk workers or deskless workers, it can be really challenging to communicate with them. But there's definitely communication channels that you use, because you need to communicate with them in order for them to do their job. So it can be email, it can be text. A lot of people communicate that way. It can also be, if there's not very many virtual ways to do that, if you have a regular recurring meeting with them, great time to recognize people. Great time to just take a few notes throughout the time when you don't see them, and then if they come in and you have a one-on-one or a regular, some kind of recurring meeting, you can call them out and be like, "This was really, really great." And even if that was, say, a week ago, employees will feel so valued that you recognized that and took the time to thank them for that when they were available, when the proper communication channels came through. There's a lot of different ways, and it's definitely a challenge. It's one that Awardco and ScreenCloud are working to solve together. But there's so many ways to be able to do that I think that, as it may require a little more intention, maybe a little more planning, but it can be something you can make part of your regular workflow. So I think that's definitely some of the ways you could do that.
And just want to comment there as well, Bronson. Morgan asks, it's a great question. It's I guess it's also thinking about how knowing your team, your employees best, and that is, are they a little bit more introverted, and maybe they would feel really awkward if you recognize them in a public setting, whether that's in a team stand up or on a digital billboard, a ScreenCloud screen. I think that's always important. Some people don't need that public announcement. Others really love it, and that's where they would take the photo of themselves as employee of the week or month. So I think that's important context.
Yes, absolutely. Because I don't know if I personally always enjoy being recognized publicly. I think probably, yeah, there's probably something to that, but I've known people that really shy away from that it almost has the opposite effect when you recognize them publicly. But it's really nice with something like ScreenCloud, where you can just pop it on a screen, or where it's something like that it is made public, but it's not necessarily like holding a megaphone to it that's in front of like a big crowd of people. So it's that nice happy medium where people can still feel recognized and appreciated and seen, but maybe not necessarily with all of the bells and whistles and kind of like the blaring lights that may come with such a public recognition. So yeah, totally agree with that. Thank you for your questions, everyone attending. Please continue to ask them. We will get to them. I see some questions here about how does the integration work, and we'll get into that in just a moment as Joe kind of walks us through that. I want to make sure that we get that to you so you can have that information. I'm moving through this a little bit more quickly here. Organizational purpose and human needs, as we talked about that psychology and kind of the hierarchy of needs there. Recognition is the bridge between achieving a purpose-driven organization and filling human needs. So how an organization has a purpose, you can think of like a Venn diagram. An organization has a purpose, and then individuals have needs. And with recognition, you can kind of like marry those two together. Hope you all liked my little my little physical Venn diagram. But it is true. Everyone deserves to feel belonging. Esteem is earned through merit. Self-fulfillment is attained by exceeding expectations. All of these things recognition can help with, and it's very, very powerful. So what kind of results can you expect to see with engagement? Many of you on this webinar, I'm sure you've seen these, at least anecdotally, as you've been trying to implement recognition throughout your organization in one way or another, whether that's with Awardco or not. But recognition provides, and this is a study from Gallup from last year, and this is just a handful of the stats, it isn't even all of them, 18% more productivity, a 23% boost in profitability, higher customer loyalty, lower turnover. I mean, I'm looking at this, and as an organizational leader, if I saw something like this, if I implemented one activity that would provide this kind of benefit, it would almost be a no-brainer. I'd be like, yeah, Absolutely. I mean, you would definitely want to do something like this to provide that. And recognition is the tool that can help with that. And so engagement and employees are 4 times more engaged when they feel recognized frequently. And so I wonder what that kind of begs the question, Joe, like what is frequently in your mind or in your experience? And does it vary?
Yeah, frequency of recognition. You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think as I commented earlier, I don't think we sadly see enough recognition on our screens, and to have to have really good stats there.
Mm.
I think you guys would have more of the best practices, but I mean, I definitely think if in my view, if it's such a great way to reinforce values of the company, people see how who you're recognizing, what you're recognizing them for. And also this idea of the promotion of just transparency of, so it says a lot about, I think, the culture of a business. But yeah, I mean, I would think weekly. And of course, at ScreenCloud, we talk a lot about the idea that I think we've all been into an organization that had some screens and had the same video looping for 6 months.
Yep, I've been there.
or the blue screen of death, or it was turned off, or we've seen some the good, the bad. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you want a real diversity of content, which keeps it interesting for people. And so of course it's always the time and the weather and maybe the traffic, especially at the end of the day when you're leaving. And certainly company updates and news are important. Content around training, career development, and then of course recognition. So what we try to work with our customers on is getting that content mix right, and also thinking about the location, because location, right? The kind of personas that are wandering by those screens, and what's the right content and the right times. So I think we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's just some of the things that I think are really important for that recognition to really be impactful.
Yeah, to kind of, I really appreciate you saying that it's a matter of curating the right content, the right mix, making sure that you have something that can be impactful. So yeah, as you can see here, there's a little bit of an example of what a recognition can look like when you have it with ScreenCloud. And we'll go into that a little bit more, but it amplifies that feel-good factor. The recognition is made and received publicly, it improves the impact of it. So you need a formal business-wide platform or a tool to maybe make that happen. You need more visible mediums. You can have team callouts. And I think maybe this is a good time to answer some of these questions that we've been getting here. Joe, maybe you can kind of start us off here. So how do you set up the recognition on TVs, and how do you get the text on there, to the recognition text on there? How does that specifically work, and is it difficult? Is it rather simple to kind of engage with? What does that look like? Yeah,
so excuse me. For time, I'll give you the very abridged version, but basically, with ScreenCloud, we're a content management system that allows you to manage content and create content and then cast it, to push it to screens. And we have a little player app that you would download onto screens, very much as you do with Netflix or Disney Plus. At that point, once we have a connection to the screen, we can then share that content or push that content down to the screen, if you will. In terms of our integration with Awardco, once you're a customers of both, we simply have a little key, a secret key that you would input, and that would allow us then to make that connection. And then what we can do is based on the location, make sure we're pushing the right recognitions to the right screens. Obviously, you don't want to recognize people in the Canadian office that are actually based in Mexico, or you give me some idea. But I've grossly simplified there, but it is a relatively straightforward connection. But you would need to be obviously customers of both ScreenCloud and Awardco.
Yeah, and we have we've done this ourselves here in our own office, like I mentioned before, and we've been able to kind of see. It's been really exciting to see that work, and maybe that might sound a little bit, I don't know, contrived coming from me giving this webinar, saying that it's been impactful, but it really has. Like, there are a number of times that I've been walking by a screen in our organization, and I've seen a recognition either about myself, but more importantly, I've seen it about other people. And I've then kind of, it's fostered this like, oh, I didn't even know they were working on that. How cool. And like, I've been more invested in the success of my coworkers and the organization as a whole, simply because I know and I'm able to see all of the great things that people are doing. And that's such a wonderful way to be able to amplify that feel good factor, like we've talked about here. So we've talked a little bit about this as well, recognition on the front line. How does that work? So we've gone over that a little bit, the challenges of frontline and deskless employees. As many of you have mentioned in the chat, it's been kind of challenging for a lot of you, like to be able to kind of work that out and be able to make sure that the people you work with are cared for and that they have the same kind of the same opportunities, shall we say, for recognition. So we've talked about that. We don't want to dive into that too much more, but we want to talk about some of the specific challenges that you might be facing. And this is a study that ScreenCloud did about some of the challenges for companies that as they've tried to implement something like this, that they've encountered. So 100% of companies that face cultural, technical, and vendor problems, a lot of them, anyone that wanted this, faced a problem with signage strategy. So that tells you that that's an issue, right? And I wonder, Joe, if you might be able to speak a little bit more to that, or some of these other statistics that ScreenCloud found in your study there.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically the challenges with signage is quite frankly, the tech just didn't work. It was on-prem. It required a laptop to be plugged into the screen, and someone shut the laptop, screen powered down. You know, a lot of so we've come a long way in terms of the reliability of this. Screens are cheaper than they've ever been, and there's in most cases there's more than enough screens to go around and to engage with, right? So that's not the challenge. Now, as we've matured a little bit, what we see is actually it's about the content, and is the content engaging, and is it simple? You know, that's the bigger thing. So a lot of the work we do is actually you know, getting our customers to think a little bit about you know, if they had their own television production studio, what kind of content would they want to put out? How would they want to tell their story? All the things going on in their business, you know, and what would that branding look like? What would be clean and simple and succinct? And I think, you know, the biggest thing is that what we found again from almost a decade of doing this is that for that signage to really be impactful, to have recall, it needs to be short and simple. So it's really about ambient messaging that is providing these kind of gentle nudges, which increase recall rates, and then ultimately complements other you know, other comms channels. So I wouldn't say it's only signage. It's the answer to every problem. It's a complement to a variety of communications channels that, you know, that an organization uses.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a complement. I love that word. That's how we've been using it. It's just been complementary to what we've been doing. It's been so just incredibly supportive of the efforts we've already been making. So there's a couple more questions here I want to make sure we address. So Rachel, your question about, you have both Awardco and ScreenCloud. What is the cost to your company to use the key for input? That will vary a little bit for you, but there is a button up in the top right of your screen that says get a demo. If you click on that, it will connect you. We will connect you with your CSM here at Awardco, and we'll be able to figure that out for you. We'll make that very simple. And anyone else interested in this integration, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about it and kind of see how it works and the kind of the particulars behind it, how it might work for you, please click that button up in the top right, and we'll get you squared away. There's another question. Are the comments on an Awardco recognition post also visible when posted on ScreenCloud? So when that kind of comes through. So Joe, maybe you can address that.
Yeah, so they're not right now, and I think the honest answer is we launched the integration 3-4 months ago, so we're still getting mutual customer feedback on what they'd like to see and not see. So this stuff, you know, we can change, update, modify pretty quickly now, and so really we just want to hear what you think and how you'd like that to look or render on our screens.
Yeah, and one thing that I've noticed as we've been using ScreenCloud is Awardco just started to be, we were not able to have GIFs, you know, kind of the moving GIFs with recognition, and those pop up on ScreenCloud now too. So it's kind of really awesome where you see the recognition and then you see the accompanying GIF, and it's kind of a neat thing to be able to see what the person meant and things like that.
I would say, you know, we're just now getting customers using the integration. So I think we'll have some really cool case studies and stories to share. But for one of our bigger mutual customers who's been using it for 6 months, you know, they're reporting already that they've seen 3 times the engagement or the recognition numbers since the recognitions have gone up on screen. That's not surprising, right? People see it and they want to participate. They want to engage. So, you know, it is kind of self-fulfilling. And I'm sure we'll continue to find that as we get more customers reporting back.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, more data will help us both be able to kind of see how this works and what is best. Should we show comments, you know, something like that? Absolutely. So continue to like give us these questions in the Q&A chat. And I've also just been notified that for some of you, that button up in the top right will probably say get integration details. Whether it says get a demo or get integration details, it's the same thing. When you click on that, we'll get you in contact with your CSM and we'll get you some more information for sure. So please continue to ask some questions about this and how this works as we continue through this. We got about 10 minutes left. We want to make sure we leave a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So continue to ask us those questions. Ask Joe, ask myself about how this works, or about the benefits of recognition, anything like that. So we've talked about some of the challenges behind using screens and kind of using different technologies to make something like this work, and how ScreenCloud overcomes those. There's some benefits here as well about what it can do. And Joe, you lightly touched on these with the anecdote earlier. But as you've been seeing this, and as a lot of the people using ScreenCloud have been doing this, these are some pretty amazing benefits that come just from populating it on a screen and making it more visible. You know?
Yeah, I think I'm always conscious not to hitting people with too many stats and percentages that are in together. But, what's quite interesting is, you know, we can do a relatively straightforward analysis of when stuff, a very technical term, content, sorry, has been up on a screen, and there's a call to action. What changed after a month or 2 or 3, right? And so just throw out some stats that aren't on here, but that's okay. So, you know, with one customer, we saw a 50% increase in compliance adherence after just a month of having the content up there. We've seen 25% reduction in the training time necessary. And one great story that I think ties into this quite well is that we had a large customer who's been with us a couple of years now on the West Coast of the US. And when they started, they wanted to run a pilot of signage in their headquarters building. So actually focused more not on frontline or deskless workers, but on desk workers, because they just wanted to see, all right, what's the business impact? Should we invest more in signage? So they did a really interesting experiment where they placed signage on every other floor of the building. And if memory serves, it was nine stories. So you basically had half had screens up and displaying content, and the other half didn't. And then 3 months after, they did a pulse survey where they asked people, what they were trying to understand is, could they recall information? What were the recall rates of the content that had been up on those screens? And what was really interesting is that the employees who worked on the floors without the signage had recall rates of around 30%, 1 in 3, if you will.
Okay.
Those on the floors with screens had recall rates of nearly 80%. So again, back to this idea of kind of subconscious cognition, right? But this is important. Some content was not remembered at all or impacted at all. And the main difference was how simple it was to understand the message. So if it was a big complicated dashboard that had been pulled in with lots of bar charts and whatnot, didn't register, right? No surprise. But if it was a simple recognition, sign up for your pension tomorrow, team happy hour Thursday afternoon, right? People got it. People remembered it. And it complemented the other channels that they had. And I think in fairness, they had MS Teams. They probably had this stuff shared in email, old-fashioned email.
Sure.
But I guess that just highlights the importance of signage to complement, but also how it improves recall rates and this whole idea of subconscious cognition and how we are picking up way more than we're aware of, basically.
Yeah. And how amazing would that subconscious cognition be if it was positive, not only, like newsworthy items within an organization, but if you're kind of pushing that positivity of Awardco, like that would be pretty great if you're just kind of absorbing that positivity instead of a lot of the challenges that are around.
And you folks, the Awardco team will know this better than I or us, but certainly there's recognition can prime people for success on the job, right?
Yes.
So that's the exciting thing here is, if you want to motivate the crew, show good work, recognize great work.
Yep. Yeah, because what gets recognized gets repeated. We like to say that a lot. If it sounds like a tagline, it's because it kind of is in my head. Like what gets recognized gets repeated. But it's true, because I remember, I think it was, I don't remember how long I'd been at Awardco, maybe several months, and it'd been a regular day, and I was just getting ready to leave, and my manager just looked at me, and like, this was not on a screen. This wasn't through Awardco or anything. I'm just sharing it to illustrate the power of recognition, because I remember this 5 years later. He just looked at me and he goes, "Hey, great work today." And like, I don't know why I remember that. Probably because it's one of the first times that a manager has ever said that to me, which is kind of sad if you think about it in that respect. But like, the power of recognition just cannot be overstated. It is so hugely impactful. And if you can put it in a more visible space, if you can put it in a place where people can kind of absorb that and recall it easier, like you said, if you put it in a place where people can have 80% better recall of it, that's great. It will only have benefits for your organization. So we want to make sure we answer some of these questions here. We've talked about the benefits and the challenges of, kind of maybe implementing something like this. But we just want to make sure that we reiterate that recognize versus recognizing, your neurotransmitters can't tell the difference. So basically what we're saying is, whether you are recognized or you are doing the recognizing, or even if you are viewing the recognition of someone else, you do feel a hit of dopamine in your own brain. And that is a powerful tool. Like, not that you want to use dopamine or behavioral tools to influence your workforce too much, but it is just it's human nature. When things are positive, when there are positive things happening, it does absorb into the minds and hearts of people you work with. So when you get recognized, you get a boost in feel-good chemicals. When you recognize others, you get the same benefits. Or when you see somebody else doing it, you get those same benefits, which is really incredible. And it can be hugely impactful for your organization. So we do have some questions as we kind of wrap up here. We want to make sure that we have some recognition best practices for you, so you can pull something out of this and understand what you can do better in your own organization. So we recommend that you celebrate every human often. You recognize high performers and you reward MVPs. Typically, we do that with we recommend 3 celebrate type programs, where people just get celebrated for being who they are: service anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, employee appreciation day. And then above that, for the kind of recognition type programs, spot recognitions, achievement, things like that. And then above that, we have a reward type program, something akin to maybe an employee of the month or a president's club, something like that. So more celebration type programs that everybody can participate in. And then, so 3 of those we recommend, and then 2 recognized programs and 1 reward program. We found a lot of our clients following this best practice have found a lot of success in it. And we also have found that typically the typical organization, no matter the industry, the employees in the average organization get recognized once a year, about, on average. If you do more than that, you're above average, which is great. So we just want to encourage you to do a little bit more, see what you can do. And with Awardco and ScreenCloud, you can make that even more visible and make it become part of your culture and make it something that is hugely impactful for you. So we have a few questions here that we want to make sure we get to. Most signage, here's one from Chris. Most signage changes the content too frequently or too slow. There's a fine line here. Maybe a picture-in-picture or a news feed below the main screen are options for better visualization. And Joe, I see you're nodding your head. It sounds like you at ScreenCloud have kind of addressed this or talked about it and thought about it before.
Yeah, I think there is a fine line here, and it depends is probably the answer on the context. I think our professional services team works with our customers to understand things like footfall. How long do people linger in a specific area? If it's a hallway and they're blowing past in 3 or 4 seconds, you might only have 2 things, which is wear your hard hat, and traffic as people are going out the door to the parking lot to their car. The canteen, the cafeteria would have longer dwell time, and maybe you have a mix of team members or personas, or however you define them. There's seasonality that is in play here. So I think those are all things that one needs to consider when it comes to the content strategy on the screens. And again, something that's really important to getting it right ultimately.
Yeah, and it's something that ultimately you need to decide what works best for your organization and things like that, but it's something that's easily doable for sure. Another question from Garrett here. Now, what are some suggestions for promoting the use of a recognition platform? We recently launched Awardco company-wide within the past year, and we want to make sure that our employees know about it and the benefits of recognition. So I think there's a couple of different ways here, Garrett, that you can think about this. We do have some materials within Awardco, and your CSM can help you be able to promote that. There's also a new email builder tool within Awardco that you can build emails and kind of get information out to users and kind of get them in the platform a little bit more. Text recognitions is also a great way so people can see it and just get it in front of them more often. But ultimately, it's just about the visualization and the visibility of recognition. So the more that you make that visible, the more that people will be able to kind of get excited about the program itself. And ScreenCloud is an incredible way to do that without sounding trite. I mean, I really mean that, because if it's up in front of people, like we've talked about, it's going to be on your employees' minds, and they'll be able to be like, wait a minute, what's this recognition here? Is that Awardco? And okay, interesting. Or if it's not called Awardco in your organization, if you call it, like celebrate or appreciate, whatever it might be. But it's a great way to do that. And then last question here for you, Joe. I want to make sure we answer this one. This is from Florian. Is the ScreenCloud integration, does it require an internet connection, or can recognition be showcased, let's say, for example, on a moving train through a remote Canadian wilderness? Great question.
Yes, it doesn't require an internet connection for us to push the fresh recognition content onto it. That said, we can cache content locally, so if there is a disconnection, you don't get the black screen or blue screen of death or whatever it is these days. Yeah. And so that will continue, that playlist, if you will, of content will continue to display until that connection's been reconnected. And we, as for the Canadian wilderness, well, we actually found what is the sailing event in Europe that moves around?
Yeah, you probably know better than me.
It'll come to me, but we found that actually they were using ScreenCloud on yachts, and they were using Starlink as their internet provider. So yeah, we're on oil rigs. We're on a lot of exciting places that I would love to visit and see it for myself. But I think we could figure out a train in the beautiful Canadian wilderness.
Yeah, absolutely. Starlink and just making it available is probably easier than we might think. So, Joe, we really appreciate your time and your expertise here with ScreenCloud. Thank you so much. And all of you attending, please, if you'd like more details on how the integration works, click the Get a Demo, or it might say Get Integration Details up in the top right of your screen. We'll make sure that you are connected with the right people and that we're able to get you some more information. We appreciate your attendance. Thank you for all your questions and your comments and your participation. And we hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.